In my hand is the key that got so many people into RC back in the 1980s, the Tamiya Hornet. However, this isn't the Hornet that you remember. This is the Hornet Evo, and they've made a bunch of changes to this buggy. I think people are really gonna like it. So coming up in this video, I'm gonna do some classic off-roading, but first let's head back to the workshop so I can show you all the new features. 2024 is actually the 40th anniversary of the Tamiya Hornet release, and to commemorate that, Tamiya designers came up with this kit, the Hornet Evo. I love Tamiya's box art. At quick glance, it looks like the old Hornet kit, but as you can see, they've updated the graphics on it. Love how the buggy is in action. But yes, it is a full build-up kit, so you're gonna have to supply your radio system, some paint, servo, battery, charger, even building tools, but it does come with a motor and a speed controller. I'm gonna get this buggy built up so we can see what changes Tamiya made to it. Here it is, the Hornet Evo all built up, and while I was assembling the buggy, I was just getting some old school racing vibes back in the late 80s, running, Hornets and frogs and grasshoppers, falcons all together, the sound of the drivetrains, the buggy's just bouncing around. It was such an awesome time, and I think we're gonna have a great time with this Evo. They've made a lot of changes to it. Looking at it right off the bat, it looks like the Hornet. We got the same body, just some minor changes here. So starting off, they do go and cut out the windshield for you. The slots in the back where the resistors used to be for the mechanical speed controller, but they've updated some of the graphics here. So instead of the plain pinstripes, they've now turned those into flames. Looks really good. You are gonna have to cut out the decals. You're gonna have to paint the body as well, just a can of PS5, and then actually I forgot to paint the fog lights, but it's go day, and you do have to go and paint the driver figure. So make sure you just have some regular model paints on hand. But there is some trimming left for the body. You're gonna have to cut out the sides, cut out the spoiler, and then screw the wing onto the back. Getting into some of the other familiar features on it, you've got the big bash bumper up front, you got the Nerf bars on the side, and then check out the tires, just the rolled rib tire in the front, the step pin spike in the rear, and I noticed that they even vented the tire from the factory. That's pretty cool. These are beadlock style wheels, so you have to put in all these little screws. But there's actually something else I need to tell you about the tires. You're gonna have to wait to find out about that. Let's pop the body off so you can check out the chassis, and I'm sure the chassis is gonna look really familiar. It's the Hornet chassis, the tub style. I'm sure it looks very familiar to a lot of you that have been in the hobby for a long time, but once we get past the chassis into the suspension, that's where you see a lot of changes, and I'll start off with the front here. Got oil-filled shocks from the factory. It's their CVA style shocks, dual O-ring on the bottom, bladder up top, and they are not super bouncy. They have an additional support for the shock tower, and then they have a metal bracket for the mount up top. But I did notice that there's a lot of gap here in the spring, and typically you would put a preload collar in here, but it just jacks up the front too high, and so you got to take that collar out so it sits at a nice ride height. My only issue with that is sometimes the spring perch pops off if you do that. So just be aware of that. Into the A-arms. Check out these new A-arms. It's a gull wing style arm. Pretty cool. It's got their screw pins holding it in. Then we've got standard caster blocks and steering knuckles. But check this out, guys. We have adjustable tie rods on a Hornet. That is so cool that they gave us those. And then they obviously had to change up the steering as well. There's a steering rack underneath the chassis here with swinging bell cranks, and they gave us ball bearings for the steering. Do you believe that? Ball bearings in a Tamiya kit? That's a rarity unless you're getting a TRF kit, but that's very cool. The one thing is though, this plate here, I did have to go and push it in a bit. It seems like the steering post may be a tad bit too long, so you just got to push this in a little bit, screw it down, and this lower plate will just fit right into place. Just a heads up while you're building it. And then while I'm here, I'll show you the bottom of the chassis. There is your battery door, and it's still got the pull tab style, but what they did is they added this little brace plate in the back, and it's got a body clip here, so you pull that out, and that just helps secure that battery plate in, because that door has fallen off on a number of people during racing back in the 80s. And then check out this new rear skid. I like how this fits and just integrates everything together. Let's get into the rear section of the chassis. So normally Hornet would have had a solid rear end setup, and as you can see, they've gone independent, but I just wanted to show you this bulkhead and adapter plate. It's a two-piece setup, and it's how they adapted the standard transmission to the back of it. And you can see that it's got the shock mounts up top. There's an extra position there if you want to move the shock outboard. There's your new body mount in the rear. But check this out. We now have independent rear suspension. So They've got these lower arms here. It is a different color plastic. I think this is their stronger plastic, more durable. You can see they've got a pretty large hub on the back, and then adjustable tie rods here as well. Really happy to see that. The suspension, nice and plush in the rear. Again, the front's a little bouncy, the rear nice and plush. And then the transmission. So we've got a gear differential in there with metal gears, metal outdrive cups, metal dog bones, metal stub shafts, and guess what's in there? Ball bearings throughout the entire transmission. No bushings, no nylon bushings, all ball bearings. That was absolutely awesome. No slippery clutch on this, just direct drive to the aluminum pinion gear that they give you. But man, I'm just really excited to see this transmission. We could probably go add a brushless system. And then the other thing I wanted to tell you about the driveline on this, and it has to do with the tires. So they give you a plastic adapter in the kit. So if you want to go use some of their standard wheels off of one of their modern buggies, like a 2.2 dish wheel, you'll be able to go and adapt that onto this and then use a bearing style front wheel and upgrade your tires if you want to. So if you bump up the power in this, you'll be able to put some decent tires on to get some traction. The only other thing I wanted to point out during the build process is the shocks. They do have two different trees for the shock parts. Just be aware of that. There's a smaller piston on one of them. I believe it was the V tree, and then the rear shocks get the X parts tree. So make sure you don't mix them up when you're building it, because you won't be able to get the pistons on the shock shaft if you mix them up. Okay, into the electronics, I just threw a standard servo in that I dug out of my spares box. They've got the servo saver up front. They do give you the 540 Mabuchi motor out back. They give you the Hobbywing ESC, which is LiPo compatible, and I just threw a Spektrum radio system in it. All right, time to go charge up the battery pack and see how the Hornet Evo drives. All right, guys, we got some old school off-road action here. Just a dirt lot, a couple jumps, and a freshly charged pack. Here we go. There's top speed on the Hornet Evo with the stock motor, 2S LiPo battery in it. But it's got some motor to it. Look at that. I'm happy with the speed for a 2S pack and that 540 Mabuchi. Now the other thing you might notice is the handling. With that independent suspension, it's not kicking around. This thing is handling the little bumps of this dirt lot here. So it's a little rougher over here in the grass, but that suspension is really soaking up the bumps. That old school Hornet would have just been like all over the place, but the Evo, it's muscling through everything. Now its limitation is still in the steering. It's got a lot of understeer, which, I mean, I'm not totally against. It's easier to drive a car with understeer. But look at that, that's full throttle, wheels cranked. Oh, hit that mound over there. But yeah, you definitely have to use a lot of brake if you want to get this thing turned. And it's actually a lot of fun. This kicks the rear end around, get some traction with those knobby tires. And look at that beast, just kicking up the dirt. I notice it steers a little bit more to the left than it does the right, just the way the steering is set up. Definitely enough steering to have fun in this dirt lot. You see a dirt mound, you gotta hit it. Bring back the knobby tires, right guys? Finally, we need to see some jumps, so here we go. I'm gonna get a good run up. They were running A scale and fifth scale off of these jumps, and look at that. The Hornet Evo just landed that thing. Let's hit it in reverse. Yeah, a little bounce at the end. vintage vibes. That jump's pretty good. All right, let's hit this middle jump here. This looks like it's got more of a kicker to it. Whoa. Just rolled at the end. I've only rolled this thing a few times so far. Let's see if we hit this jump again. Full throttle, nice and smooth off the jump. Yeah, awesome. And finally, the big one. They were sending fist scales off of this. Not this way. They're coming from this direction over here, so I'm gonna get a good run out. We're gonna hit top speed on this thing and just send it. Yeah, all right, awesome. The backside's a little rough on this one. Oh, ow, oh, and there goes the tie rod. I think we just popped it off. These Tamiya tie rods, these ball ends I should say, they're a little soft, but this should pop right back on. Oh, it's full of dirt. Just like that, back in action. We'll get one more big jump in. Here we go. Full throttle on it. I think the battery is dying out anyway. But we landed that jump. Wow. I think a lot of people are just going to be happy with this Evo. I mean, it's got that classic styling, the classic look, but the performance, I'm really surprised with the performance. This independent suspension, oil-filled shocks, the drivetrain, it's just really letting this car hook up, and I'm enjoying it. That was a fun test. If you thought it was cool, smash that like button and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. Also, if you want to be a member, there's a link in the video description below. But I love what Tamiya's done here. They've given us a vintage buggy with a more modern day performance driving experience. It's just really clever how they used the original Hornet tub chassis and then adapted the DTO2 transmission to it, gave us the CVA oil shocks, and it still looks at first glance like a original Hornet. But once you go and drive this thing, I mean, it's just an absolute blast the way it handles. No more bouncing around like the old one did. This one flows nice and smooth through the rough terrain, and it jumps really well. I was surprised at how level this thing flew off of those big jumps. And although some landings were a bit bouncy and I did pop a ball end off, I mean, this buggy was really just enjoyable to drive. I went and saw those optional wheel adapters in the rear just so you guys could see a different set of tires on this. These are the tires off of my Kumamon buggy. And I think these rib tires will actually help out a bit in the steering department because with those stock tires, it does understeer a bit. But again, it's kind of part of the fun of this buggy. I'll throw a link for the kit in the video description.